Up until about 5 minutes ago, I did not believe in free will. I was a hard determinist, somebody who believes that basically all of our decisions can be explained, and anything that where we think we have the freedom of choice to do whatever we like is actually an illusion. It's a rationalization that we come up with after making a decision that we really didn't have any choice to make. In fact, the whole universe is a deterministic model. That's while there may be random chance involved in terms of the collapse of a superposition of a particle, overall, if we understood the beginning and all the component parts that led up to where we are today, we'd be able to, maybe using some sort of advanced supercomputer, predict what's going to happen next. In other words, there's a deterministic string of activities from the beginning of time until now, and anything where we think we have the ability to make decisions is on some level an illusion. That is a deterministic point of view. It can be negative, but it can be positive as well. We stop blaming individuals for social problems. We start to see the world as a series of interconnections rather than saying that we have the power to change the universe on our own. It allows us to sort of relax and understand how the universe works. But there is a flaw in this reasoning that I only just discovered, and I'm sure many other people have discovered, and I'm not the first, but it's a thought that occurred to me that hadn't happened before, and it's about the idea of twins and random numbers. Now, before I get into this in any greater detail, let me explain a little bit more about where I come from on determinism, because when we look at our decisions in life, we like to think we're in control. There's a story by Lao Tzu, a Taoist belief, I guess, the story of a rock in a stream, that the rock falls into a stream, and when the stream bends left, the rock says, you know what, I think I'm going to turn left now. And then when the stream drops down a cliff, it says, you know, I feel like I might go down there. And the rock constantly thinks it's under control, but of course, the rock is lost in the stream and is only imagining that it has control over the situation because it makes it easier for the rock, which, of course, rocks don't think that way. Rocks tend to be very stalwart in their opinions. But the point is that we tend to like to see the world as being in some way within our control. It's easier to blame people for problems that we see if we think, well, they could have done something about it. It's easier for us to say, you know what? I have the power to change my own life. The problem is that everything that we have is connected in some way to some other cause. If we were to look at whatever we want to do, there are certain limitations placed just by the nature of the universe itself, just by quantum physics and by physics itself. I can't walk from here to Mercury. I can't live on the sun. I can't time travel back using no special technology and just travel back to the time of the dinosaurs because I feel like it, erase Hitler from history and then come back again. Nobody has that ability because they are bound by the laws of, we are bound by the laws of physics, we're bound by the laws of logic, and we're bound by our physical bodies. There's also certain things that are technically probably possible to do, but that no human will ever achieve because it's too difficult. Like, I will never become strong enough to lift a mountain or lift a house like Superman. It's maybe not logically impossible, but it's basically physically impossible. My human body doesn't have that capability. Maybe future generations using special technology will, but I don't. So certain things I just will never achieve no matter how much I want to do. There's also the accident of my birth, when and where I was born and who I am. Those were created by genetics and also by the socio-economic system under which I was born. Like, if I was born in a war-torn country, let's say a place like Gaza, which is currently experiencing a massive humanitarian crisis, if I were born in that area, there is a possibility I might get out and become like a famous scholar or a famous actor or something like that. But the chances would be stacked against me. I'd have a much more difficult time achieving that, and it's very unlikely. Statistically, most people born in those war-torn areas where they'll be killed or end up revolutionary people, or they will end up maybe as just survivors with severe PTSD. Where I'm born and the privileges I was born into as a middle class-ish white North American Canadian define a lot of my life, define what opportunities I've had and what I was likely to do. And while there's certain outliers that have a bit more flexibility in this, the majority of people are going to be severely impacted by where they were born. They're also going to be defined a little bit by their genetic code. In other words, first of all, I'm a human, so I'm not going to have the sight or intelligence of an octopus. I'm not going to have the sight of like a spider. I'm going to have human characteristics, and I'm also going to have certain predilections put on me by my genetic code. I might have certain interests or certain elements of my sexuality, my gender identity, and other areas that are determined, at least in part, by my genetic sequence and the gametes and all the different elements of my personality that were created in the womb. So there's certain things that that are just true due to my biology of who I am and my DNA. There's also my sociology and my sociological upbringing. Although I said where I was born, I've also had sociologically a lot of different things happen in my life that have helped shape me. My education, the kind of human relationships I created from a very young age, maybe delving into psychology. I also have the society I'm in, the free speech that we have some access to in Canada, my health determinants that are caused in part by having a free healthcare system. There's a lot of elements of our society that have also impacted. So when I make a decision, let's say I say, I feel like going and ordering pizza today, right? Well, if I had never heard of pizza, I probably wouldn't be ordering it. If I lived in a society where we were war-torn area, I probably wouldn't have survived that. If I hadn't watched Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when I was a kid, I probably wouldn't have the same affinity for pizza. I'd probably still like it, but I might have different associations with it, and I might want it in different ways. I also have a certain income level where I expect, you know what, I can afford to get pizza this week. I can afford to do these kinds of things. So they're going to affect my decision making, and the way I am as a person defines, you know, the kind of things I want on my pizza, when I'm going to order that pizza, what I'm going to do. So although I think of it as my free will, as I decided I want pizza, the kind of person I am decided that I wanted pizza in the first place and basically determined what decision I was going to make. Well, I might say, I just decided I wanted pizza. All those things caused and led me to want the pizza. And if I hadn't been led in that way through my genetic code, my DNA, my social upbringing, where I was born, I would never have come to that conclusion. And in fact, you might say that that conclusion is an inevitability of that setup. And it also is influenced by what happened in my day to day, or what happened in my week, what happened moment to moment, the way that certain things smell around me, the things that I see outdoors when I look outside. All these things had micro impacts on me. So I might think, I just decided I wanted pizza, but maybe I saw a pizza delivery guy earlier. Maybe I saw pizza on TV. Maybe I know a great recipe for pizza because I was taught it in one of the jobs that I had, and I haven't had it for a certain amount of time, and it's pretty much inevitable I'm going to want it again. So there's a bunch of different things that leads me to want that pizza. So when I think to myself, I just decided I want pizza, all these elements conspired to get me to the point where I wanted that, and where my decision to order it was basically inevitable or predictable. Maybe there's some random chance in there, but again, random chance isn't freedom. If you roll a dice and it lands on a 6, that's not me saying, aha, I'm free to choose that 6. No, the physics of tossing the object and maybe some random gods of luck, if you want to believe in those things, determined that randomness. So none of that is freedom of decision making. None of that is the freedom to decide or create my reality. So how can we say that there are any decisions we make that are actually free? That, in other words, that it isn't completely explainable from a deterministic model. Well, this got me thinking about twins. Twins don't live identical lives. Even if you put them in the same family, or you remain them in the same family, you grow them up in the same situation, you have them exposed to the same media, they share most of the same DNA, if not the exact same DNA sequence, with minor changes perhaps in a hormone level here and there, or some other aspect here and there, but overall they've been exposed to all the same experiences. Well, they're not going to have all the same exact interests. Even identical twins have differences in interests, even as similar as they might seem. You might have a twin or know somebody who's a twin and go, no, they think exactly alike. But in fact, most twin studies have shown that twins born to and living through the exact same situation have many differences. They tend to downplay those when they want to sort of show their affinity with their twin, but there are some things. They might not like olives, their twin does. They might like olives, but maybe they like green ones, their twin likes black olives. They might make all kinds of decisions. And if you look at two twins' lives, it's also readily apparent without doing a lot of sociological experimentation that that's true. Like, if you see two twins walking on the street, they don't always walk in exactly the same line, going in exactly the same direction, turning in exactly the same time, and thinking the exact same thoughts, even though they've been exposed to pretty much the same experiences. Now, they might have been influenced by different experiences because they've been forced into it. Like, one of them was put in soccer practice, the other one wasn't. They had maybe different classrooms because their names were split up when they were put into grade 7, so they experienced different things growing up. But even from a very early age, twins don't act as a mirror of each other in terms of their exact decision making. So either it's true that there are all these micro influences, minor influences, the smell of a flower, the way the wind blows, some random particle collapsing, that has caused them to make these different decisions. In other words, to take a left instead of a right, to decide that they're going to buy the yellow shoes instead of the blue ones. These kind of decisions either are determined by some sort of micro decision-making factor that we don't yet understand, we can't analyze with accuracy, or there's some level of free will in their decision making. They decided that they're going to wear the blue shoes because maybe they just decided that, you know what, I like those today. They decided that they were going to try out a few more types of olives, and they decided they liked the green ones. Like, they were given the opportunity at some point to try an olive, and they weighed the things, and they said, you know what, I could go either way. I could decide not to try them, or I could decide them. And the one twin said, you know what, I'm not going to try it. And they said, weighing everything up, I've decided I am going to take it. They made a decision. They were given two options of approximately equal value, and they decided one of them. This goes towards the dichotomy of the sheep. This is from a famous story. I don't remember what it is, but it's a philosophical parable. The concept is that if you put two equally delicious snacks in front of a pig or a horse or a sheep, that they'll stand there forever and starve to death because they can't decide which one they're going to go to because they're of equal value. Of course, we know this doesn't happen in real life. The sheep will just go to one that they favor, and then they'll go to the other one. The point is, if you look at two situations where either opportunity is equally viable in our mind, then at some point we have to assume that there's some sort of decision if they're exactly equal. Now, can I prove that these decisions are actually equal, or there isn't some micro influence that's causing me to make this decision, to decide that between these two apparently equal decisions, one is the inevitable one that I will eventually pick because you understand a little bit more about my psyche and my day-to-day experiences? Yeah, it's possible that those micro influences are the deciding factor. I'd like to think of the example of those two twins that we described sitting in an identical room. They're sitting side by side, and they're asked to pick a number between 1 and 10. Now, there isn't any particular influence why 1 would be higher than 10, although we know there's psychological reasons why you might be more likely to pick 7 or 6 or something like that. But let's say they're asked to pick a number between 1 and 10 100 times, and so we start to dilute the effect of that predictableness. But we go through and we say, pick a number between 1 and 10, and the first time they both pick 7. And the next time they laugh, and then the next time they pick 6. And then they go, well, they're on the same wavelength. This is really funny. But then one of them picks 3 and one of them picks 5. The situation and the psychology of the situation is the same. Nothing else has changed in the experiment. But at some level, one of them decided they were going to choose 3, and the other one choose that they were going to do 5. They've had the same experiences that were, at least in terms of anything obviously relevant. Could there be some micro influence by some other factor that we're not seeing that allows one to choose 3 and one to choose 5. We know it's not actual random chance because humans don't have random chance devices inside their brains. Everything is sort of a weighed decision or a rationalization. So we can't really say it's actual random chance because they don't actually have a random number generator in their head. On some level, they actually have to make a decision between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. But something led them to decide 1 or 3 in this case, and one of them led to them to decide 5. Was it inevitable? Was it predictable? Is it something that there's a definite line of clear demarcation saying this was caused by a specific factor? Or is there this other element of human choice involved between choosing 3 and 5, given the same exact setup? I could keep going round and round and speculating that there was some micro impact, that some small thing, like the way that the size of the room was, the exact vision they got of the questioner's eye, maybe made them think a bit differently, maybe the pattern, the timing, maybe the exact factor. There could be any number of factors. But these are all speculative. At this point, to assume that it is simply not possible that any of these decisions were influenced by free will, in other words, that were just decided by that person. First of all, it goes against what we observe. What we observe is somebody thinking about the problem and making a decision and deciding to go with this number over that number. We know we can't predict in advance what number they're going to do. We might be able to run on a graph and see what it's likely to do, but we don't know the final decision until it's made. So we can't predict it. We know that there are, at least on present and obvious levels, there are no particular reasons why one number would be favored over another. We don't have the capacity to look at those micro impacts on such a level that we know with certainty that occurred. So it is a more scientific conjecture based on the evidence we have that free will is at least on some level responsible for the decision making. Because if free will wasn't involved, we'd have to come up with another factor. And at this point, it is sort of an extreme claim. And we should be looking for extreme evidence, but we don't have the capabilities at this point to look at the micro analyze each individual particle of the universe to work out all the tiny impacts that might have led to them choosing 3 over 5 or 5 over 3. There are restrictions that put in our place, but within those restrictions, there was some decision-making factor in the brain. We can even measure it. Some decision-making factor in the brain that led to the decision to choose this number over that number, which means that free will exists. Not absolute free will in the sense of I can do anything I want, but within a limited set of and scope of possibilities, the fact that people can choose one over the other is the most logical scientific reaction. Anything else requires us to rely on faith that we will one day find the answers that we aren't capable of ever finding. We may one day put all those factors together, and if that is so, then we can reject the idea of free will at that time. I keep wanting to say free speech. That we can reject the idea of free will at the time when we find the compelling evidence. But we don't have the capability to find the evidence for this extraordinary claim at this time. And since extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and we are not able to find any evidence that completely eliminates free will from the equation, it is scientifically unrealistic, or it is unscientific to presume that free will does not exist, just as it is unscientific to presume that all our decisions are down to free will. Given an equal decision between two fairly identical positions, we must conclude that free will is the more scientific and viable logical option. Now, I'm not saying that free will definitely exists, but what I'm saying is that a very non-emotional, very scientific-minded, very dispassionate observer would have to conclude that free will is the most likely explanation for this scenario until we find contrary evidence.